Hi, everyone. Welcome to Addressing Bias in Creative Placemaking. I'm here with my co-host, Dominique Miller.
Keishan Art Center, part of the Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about art and history and why it's specifically good to use art to talk about history. A lot of times when children learn about art through textbook, the great tragedy they have is they think history is only the big monumental things they're talking about. But in reality, history is the things that happen to you in your past that affect you personally and your community in a way that needs to be discussed and talked about. One of my ideas to affect younger people to learn and share history on their own personal level now is to, next time they have a family gathering, is to have family members contribute recipes and then have those recipes collected in a book. And at the gathering, have pictures taken of the family members enjoying those recipes. So that way, young kids can learn how to take part in collecting history and heritage and preserving it. So that way they can learn how to be historians to tell history to future generations. On a personal level, that can be relevant. But on another level, I like to use history to talk about how it affects the whole society. Within a Black community, we are from a community culture in Africa. And in that culture, we all look alike, talk alike, and we love each other. And when you're part of that kind of community where you love the way you look, it's a different type of way you affect each other. But once we came to America, different types of imagery was used to have an effect on the way that we feel about ourselves. So my way is to recapture that history. I use images like this, which is nigger hair tobacco. It was an actual tobacco product. I take this product and superimpose it on the flag of Angola, because in certain parts in the South, huge slave populations were from Angola, Africa. And just so happened, in New Orleans, they have a plantation named Angola because all of the slaves were from that area. After slavery, that plantation was turned into a penitentiary. And that penitentiary is still named Angola. And it's still filled with the descendants of Angola, Africa. So to tell that history and why people are looked at in certain situations like that, I retook that stereotype marketing tool and showed how it had an effect on the descendants of the Angolas and how they feel about themselves now. And at the bottom, I incorporated part of the flag of Angola, which is geared and is shaded to show work and how they have their things and how they work hard to be successful. And I took away the gold from that to show what would happen when you have the people taken away from that. And on the top, I used a racist caricature by Charles 12 Trees. He drew Black people in a lot of bad, disparaging ways. And I retook that imagery to show Flint, Michigan, and how children have to survive horrific conditions and how to deal with living with less than the proper things you need in life. So part of my way to use history is I reclaim the bad things that were shown about us in history, and I reclaim it to tell our story in a better way. And you don't have to be trained to do that. You just have to use your heart and sensitivity to reclaim the identity of the truth. And my other way of doing that is by talking about this individual. This gentleman is Eugene Bullard. He lived a life so fabulous that people call him the Black Forrest Gump. And everybody should know about him, but very few people do. And that's all because he's a Black person. This man is one of the most decorated soldiers in World War I, and he's a hero of France, but he was born in Georgia. His his father would constantly tell him about how people could be free in France regardless of their color. So as a young child, he hopped aboard a boat and stowed his way aboard across seas and eventually made his way to France. He was a professional boxer and he was a club owner. But at World War I, he fought in the Foreign Legion and was highly, highly decorated, but was severely wounded. But that did not stop his determination to fight. After he was wounded, he continued on, and he learned to fly and became a highly decorated fighter pilot. Eugene Bullard, after the war, he settled in France and opened up a nightclub. He became friends with Ernest Hemingway and everybody else who was a top person in the high life of France at that time. But the tragic circumstances that World War II was about to start, and with him being a highly decorated person and a hero of France, he had to escape and come back to America. But in America, he was nobody but an elevator operator. Nobody knew about his heroic deeds or the sacrifices he paid the way for by putting his life on the line constantly. Eugene Bullard was a big fan of Paul Robeson, who was a civil rights champion. In New York, it was a big protest because most people thought Paul Robeson was a communist. And when Eugene Bullard tried to cross the picket line to go to Paul Robeson concert, the police beat him severely. And he lost the vision of one of his eyes and he died a few years later. So I tell these kind of tragic incidents so people can have an idea of a fuller sense of history and not just the heroes that we know about, but the heroic deeds of the people who don't get the monuments they deserve. And when we go about collecting those stories and presenting them, we get to be historians on a grand scale that society needs. Because when you open the history books, everybody knows those stories. But it's in between those stories, those brave individuals, they need to be talked about. Like this lady, for instance. This is Claudette Colvin. Everybody knows who Rosa Parks is, and we celebrate Rosa Parks. But before that was Rosa Parks, there was actually this little girl who refused to give up her seat. And nobody fought for her. There aren't any statues for her. There are no celebrations. But Claudette Colvin was a 15-year-old girl who refused to give up her seat and went to jail in Alabama. And nobody fought for her. And this was 9 months before Rosa Parks. So when we go back and we need to pay tribute to the people who fought for us and who sacrificed and who just forgotten about. So sometimes with art, I feel like it's a duty to not just make decor or things that will make you comfortable, but things that tell a better story about who we are as a people and who sacrificed and why we don't pay tribute to the young people who were courageous way before other people had financial backing behind it. Because the sad thing, when Rosa Parks sat on the bus, she knew the NAACP people was waiting to bail her out. She knew that. They already told her they would have her back. When this little child did it, she did it because she was tired and sick and tired. And she just didn't feel like taking it anymore. And when she did it, she was chased out of town. Nobody helped her out. Nobody had any support for her. So when children do decisions like that, to stand up for all society, I think this is one of the most brave individuals America's ever had. And it's a shame that we don't celebrate her or give her her flowers when she was alive. So to me, it's important that our history tell these stories and not just the Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks does deserve to be a hero. She is. But just as much as Claudette Colvin. And I did that on top of these Supergirl comic books because she is a Supergirl, and during the time of these comic books, they had no black characters on there. So it's important to put black people in the story when you can, and when it's true and accurate. Not just to put a black person on that, but an accurate depiction of a hero. With this image, it's not just important that we look at the heroes, but we also have to look at why we were looked at in a certain way. This was the logo from an actual chicken restaurant called Coon Chicken Inn. When you see this kind of image as a black man or something of a mockery, something to be laughed at, or funny, it goes back to America's first invention of entertainment, which is the minstrel show. See, America makes entertainment of making black people nothing but a mockery or something to laugh at or entertain. That's why it's important that we not be devoid of fun, but also show a side of seriousness and love and dignity to juxtapose the constant buffoonery people see of us. And that is only reclaimed when we tell our stories and we bring able to show these images and stand next to them and say, this is not us. So when we do our history, it's not just important that we tell the things that we celebrate, we also have to show the things that hurt us and put us in a bad light. Because by acknowledging this, we can acknowledge that we are better than this. And this is not an actual representation of us and who we are and what we stand for. But when we don't put light on this, it continues to be a way of education for people who don't know us. Some people only know us from these images and advertisements. And that's how they got to learn about us. So it's important that we reclaim our history to show them who we really are and how we really feel. And that's why it's important that art isn't just decor and bowls of fruits, but important moments of history of who people actually are, locally and globally. And that's why it's important that we teach kids to be historians and collect their histories from their families and from their communities, and to learn how to go into the libraries and look up the old stories of their neighborhoods. I mean, history is all around us and it's abundant. And we'll use it to our benefit, it makes society better. But when we ignore it, it repeats over and over again. I'm so glad I was able to share some of my art with you and the reason behind doing it. And I hope that after this short talk that people can have a better sense of why it's important to use art to reclaim your history, to tell a better story of who you are and who your people are. Do we have any questions?
It doesn't look like there are ones yet. There's a lot of people talking in the comments, but it doesn't look like we have questions yet. We might take questions after this. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take questions after. So next is John and Amanda from Design Local. Thank you so much, Charvis.
Thanks, Charvis. That was awesome. For our presentation, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. So today, Amanda and I are going to be talking about the Akron Cultural Plan and our work to acknowledge race and privilege as part of the planning team for better planning outcomes. So my name is Josh Lapp. I am co-founder and principal of Designing Local, and with me I have the managing principal and also co-founder of Designing Local, my business partner, Amanda. She can say hi.
Good morning, everyone.
And before we get into the meat of the presentation, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our firm so you kind of can know, what we're all about. We really focus on cultural planning. We're based out of Columbus, Ohio, but we also do public art planning, procurement, we do some historic preservation work, and we have a third business partner who's a landscape architect who does, public space design, urban design, that kind of thing. And our whole focus really in all of the work that we do is creating vibrant, engaging, and authentic places. Our cultural planning, our public art planning work is really nationwide. So this is, I think, a snapshot of a recent snapshot of our work around the country. Maybe missing a few places, but we really kind of really enjoy going into different places all around the country and having kind of an exploration wherever we're working and learning about new communities, new states, and bringing our national lens of best practices into these communities, but also really building off of the community stories and the local fabric. So a little bit about Akron. As I mentioned, that we're actually based out of Columbus, Ohio. So Akron is a nearby community about an hour and a half away from where we live, which is, as you saw from our map, a little bit unusual. It was almost a local project for us. But Akron is a Rust Belt city. The closest large city to it would be Cleveland. It's about 62 square miles and around 200,000 people. It's a Rust Belt community, so it has depopulated from its high of around 300,000 folks. And in the metro area, which includes the nearby city of Canton, there's around 700,000 people. So although it's kind of a satellite of Cleveland, it is a metro area in its own right. And it's not, it's not Cleveland, it's not Columbus, it's not other Ohio cities. It's really got its own vibe and its own feel. And obviously most folks outside of Ohio have heard of community organization. It's really kind of the central arts hub for Summit County, which is the county that Akron is located in. And Arts Now serves a number of communities, but of course Akron is kind of the large city in the county, so they do a lot of their work with Akron, with the city of Akron itself. And so Arts Now had been, had a goal of doing a cultural plan for the community. They had done a cultural landscape study through the Knight Foundation, who's a big supporter of programming in Akron. And the whole idea of the cultural plan was to strengthen existing institutions, help, provide more opportunities for creating culture, providing vibrant experiences for folks in Akron. And the cultural plan was to be funded by the GAR Foundation and Knight Foundation. So we really went into this process with an intended direction of promoting, Akron as a world-class cultural destination. There are really fabulous cultural institutions in Akron. Again, they're supported by the Knight Foundation and other local philanthropic funds. And really, it has some world-class cultural destinations, especially for a community of its size. And we really had this focus of understanding, what the community wanted to define for the future of arts and culture, and we also wanted to assess the community partnerships between these cultural institutions and the funders and the public. So that's really how we went into this project, sort of hey, this is a typical cultural planning process. And then we also wanted to do a plan for public art for the city of Akron. Again, the Knight Foundation funds a lot of the Knight Arts Challenge in Akron. So there's a lot of projects happening, and the city wanted to kind of grasp how they could also contribute more towards public art, and really have they did not have a public art program in place. They didn't have a commission. They didn't have any of these things. So they were really looking to, listen and learn and find out how they could, strengthen the culture and the public art in the community. So Amanda, do you want to talk a little bit about the discovery phase?
Sure. So, as we began the process, it was really important for us, as Josh said, to really assess our partners and understand what it was that they had envisioned for the plan itself. But in addition to those people who arts and culture had kind of been the thing that they kept for the community for so long, we wanted to establish a steering committee that was made up of some of those arts leaders and some of those arts administrators, but was really all made up of community members. And so we formed a steering committee that was very large for a lot of the plans that we're doing, and that was very intentional. We had artists on there, we had neighborhood leaders, we had CDC leaders, which, oftentimes CDC leaders, unless it's an area plan, are not kind of brought to the table to have conversations. But because this was a very neighborhood and citywide planning process, we added those folks to the steering committee. We had over 150 individual stakeholder meetings. It became very clear in Akron that for quite a long time, the community perceived arts and culture to be held specifically downtown and held by a few leaders. And so at the end of every meeting, we would ask people, are there others that you think we should speak with? And of course, every person, had 3 to 5 others. And when we kind of got to the end of that list of people, we then opened it up to the community and said, hey, if you're interested in talking about your vision for arts and culture in Akron, please reach out to us. We're not turning individuals away for a conversation. This is your plan. The outcome of this plan is about you, which yielded 150 individual meetings. Those meetings on average are about an hour each. So we spent a ton of time listening and learning. And I see in the Q&A by Kenny that is not a typical amount of stakeholder meetings. But Akron is very involved, and this plan meant so much to both the arts leaders in the community, but also the community itself. And we felt that the time was worth dedicating to these conversations.
And I would say this is where the project began to take a turn from, our typical process, which
Right.
is a good one, but not always one that has so much engagement. And part of that is, you have to have a willing client. So Arts Now and Nicole, who's the executive director of Arts Now, she was really intent on making sure that we listened and heard everything that the community had to say. And so as we began these stakeholder meetings, this is where we really started to open up and move into what I would say is one of the, certainly the most inclusive and honest planning processes we've ever done and worked in and been a part of. So, we started to hear right away particularly from, Black residents, artists, and other folks of, all kinds of diversity, I guess, in the community, whether it was folks that didn't have access because of economic reasons or because of differing abilities or some kind of special need. So these initial conversations and the willingness of our client to really open up to doing this in a different way allowed us to start forming this steering committee in a way that was really much more inclusive than we normally than a lot of folks will do. When you're forming a steering committee, folks will say, okay, like let's get the leaders of all these organizations at the table, and we had those conversations too amongst the leadership of the cultural institutions of the community. But as we all know, that leadership tends to not be very diverse. It tends to be a lot of white folks, especially a lot of wealthier white folks. And so that's not representative of the community. So we were able to take, what we're hearing in just our early conversations and say, let's make sure we have a diverse steering committee and one that is much more representative of the community. And Amanda can tell you a little snippet from one of the folks that really it was like, I think we left this meeting crying because of
I'm going to call her Grandma Judy, but that's not her name. But we did call her Grandma Judy with her real name, kind of following Grandma. And she was really, a Black grandma in her neighborhood, and everybody viewed her as such. And, she had all of these people that she was making sure, that their children were making it to this really wonderful after school program that we were having a lot of our meetings at their building specifically. But in one meeting in particular, she said to us, I've never been invited to participate in a planning process before. And, I never thought I would be sitting alongside some of the people that are in this room. And as you can imagine, because of the legacy that a lot of these companies have left in Akron, there is a considerable amount of wealth in that community. And we had those people on the steering committee, but we also had people from the community who were, huge pillars and leaders within each of their neighborhoods, even micro neighborhoods, not just, specific wards of the city. And I should also mention too, Josh, that at every meeting that we had, which was the steering committee, we always, kind of gave them a snapshot of where we were and said, hey, this is who we've talked to. Who are we missing? And these people always had people to add to our list. And so there was never a point in which we said, okay, we're done with this portion of the plan. It was always, here's who we've talked to. Are we missing anyone? Are there people that we're missing? Please continue to rack your brain and send us those folks.
So, with that foundation of the plan, which was really just, we went in with something in mind and then immediately changed that once we started hearing feedback, we were able to move into the actual public engagement phase of the process, which was, I think, a little stunning. And we'll talk about some of the events that we held, which were really, again, some of the best that I've experienced. And this isn't, I'm not saying that this because we planned them, but really a lot of this was because of the willingness of the client and the community and folks in the community who would step up and say, we can provide this and we can do these things. So our listening phase was really that. I mean, this was listening, and this was us listening, and this was us learning, about how to, as planners, we learn these things, in our education. But once we're really on the ground and we're hearing things from the people who really care about, the person at that meeting, a lot of the people that we're talking to one-on-one that aren't necessarily usually a part of these processes and aren't listened to. This was an opportunity for us to stop talking and just, ask a few questions, but really hear about the true wants and needs and issues that are facing, Black residents, but other immigrants, again, people of all abilities that don't always have access to some of these things. So, we had over 200 hours of just one-on-one conversations between Amanda and I and a few other members of our team. So that's a really significant amount of time put into this. And then we also were able to start putting together focus groups and meetups. So some of these, again, we heard feedback at one of our early focus groups with artists that, the Black artists in the community are not being heard, and that maybe we weren't the right people to facilitate those sessions and listen. So we actually ended up hiring artist facilitators, both, Black and white and other people in the community too. But we had specific artist sessions focused on Black artists and giving them an opportunity, to engage with, again, artists who are Black and or who are leaders in their community. And that was a good opportunity for us to say, we love doing our work, but sometimes we know it's better to bring somebody in and to pay somebody else, particularly artists, to facilitate these sessions, and open the room up for, those difficult conversations. Now, we were there listening and observing, in the back of the room, but we weren't the star of the show, and that was not why we were hosting the event. We were hosting these events for people to be able to really tell us, the things that are holding them back, that are holding the community back, and that are problems. So along with all of this intense listening, individually to artists and to small groups of folks. We also wanted to put together opportunities. Again, this was pre-COVID. This was in 2019, for folks to really come out and not just come out and tell us, what they needed, but also to feel like they were a part of the process and to really, for us to spend some of the budget not on our fee, but on putting on a really great event that made people feel special and feel like they were part of the process. So that is what we aim to do, and what Arts Now also aim to do as part of this. So Amanda, you can talk a little bit about our kickoff event.
Sure. So the first thing we did kick off the plan was really invite everyone who had participated in one of those stakeholder sessions. So we had over 300 people come to this event. These were all the arts leaders, all the elected officials, the mayor, and we invited a bunch of different cultural organizations to, participate in creating content for that event. So we had some really wonderful dancers from the Polcom and dance as part of the programming. We also had this really awesome mixologist create some special cocktails that were, for the event. We had this really fantastic chef, this African-American chef who was transitioning from a food truck to a real restaurant, come and cater the event. The zoo was there, brought some different animals to come and walk around. We had Sharetta. She was one of the spoken word artists who came and wrote a poem about these are who we're celebrating so far. This is what we've heard in the process, and we're really excited to move on to our next phase. You kind of kick on. And Josh, do you want to keep going or?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Amanda.
Okay. Okay, so is a social services organization that provides transportation to people who are differently able to get to different events and appointments and just anything that they need. And so we invited some of their clients to participate in a focus group, and many of them, had a lot of things to share with us that were really easy fixes in the cultural sector. Specifically, a lot of people, may require an aide to be there, but because they would have to participate, in order to participate, they would have to purchase 2 tickets. Suddenly an event becomes a little bit, or a lot rather, too expensive. You can't go to a concert and pay for 2 tickets. That's unfair when it's just really about you getting to the event. And so, that was one of the things that was brought to our attention. And some of the venues, and again, this was pre-COVID, agreed, to waive a lot of those extra tickets for people who needed aids. But that was something that a lot of those organizations hadn't thought about, or, even conceived that there was a need there. And some of the other things were about different events and like festivals in particular. So, what does a festival look like with an accessible bathroom? And who has an accessible bathroom? What are the businesses that you can rent some of those portable bathrooms from? So a lot of these things are just kind of, I don't want to say they are no-brainers. These are things that we should be thinking about consistently and often, but many of the cultural event organizers in Akron, just weren't, because there were so many other things. And so we developed a set of recommendations to make these more accessible for people. And then another event that we hosted was with Age Friendly Akron. So they have a commission who focuses on, their population that's 55 and above. And so we coordinated an event at, Josh, what's the venue?
It's called Stan Hewitt. It's actually a National Historic Landmark.
Beautiful.
A mansion house built, I believe, by the Goodyear, the family that owns Goodyear.
And the Stan Hewitt House stepped up and really offered to host and pay for this tea for all of these, seniors. And it was a really interesting experience for us, because we quickly found that these people, they weren't very comfortable RSVPing to our event online. And we needed them to RSVP, of course, in order to prepare all the catering and the music and the tables and the chairs and all of the things that you need for an event. But because we were planning this event with Age Friendly Akron, they told us, we would prefer not to have to RSVP online. So we actually set up a phone message line where people could call in and leave a message and say, hi, my name is Amanda. I'm RSVPing for 2 people. And I'd also like assistance in transportation getting there. And we partnered with the local transit authority to go and pick up folks and bring them to this event and then take them home. And so we really made this a special event. There were, some amazing musicians there, really great food. We had some people dress up in their nicest attire, tee. Some people were in hats, you can see, to really come. And it was a special day for people to talk about what would make them be able to access arts and culture more, and how to make them feel most comfortable at those events.
And, obviously this was great because we heard a lot of specific issues that are facing the senior community. But also, we heard about lots of opportunities to ensure that, so much of the cultural sector, the focus is on younger people, bringing in the millennials and that kind of thing, and shifting to different demographics. However, this was really important for us. Again, the phone call line, all these things were important just in organizing the events itself, to help our cultural institutions and leaders that were part of the planning process understand some of the issues facing folks. And again, transportation was a big issue here, and we were able to partner to help provide some rides for this. And again, also offering events like this, that are free for the community. Obviously, this was part of a planning process, but things that are more accessible to the population. This was something that we heard a lot. A lot of older folks are on a fixed income, so this was really important that they still have access to these great opportunities. So this was a really fun one for us. And we did, we mentioned earlier that we, paid artists as part of this process. I think we had artists at almost every event that were paid. We find that to be really important. The plan is advocating for us to pay artists for things, but the planning process also has to reflect that. So if we were engaging artists, and we did for most of the things that we did, we were paying them. And so there were some musicians at this event, and there were visual artists at others that we'll talk about again soon. I already mentioned the artist meetups that we hosted. And again, we had artists facilitate some of these meetups. And we had one specifically focused and facilitated by Black artists for, Black community members and artists that wanted to, focus specifically on these issues. And, before we get to the end, I think we can go ahead and talk a little bit about one of the things that was just launched last week that arose from this specific meeting. Amanda, you want to talk about that?
So there were going to be 6 artist meetups. One artist in particular wanted to have a very small group of people. And she wanted so each person got $150 for the facilitation, and then got $150 to spend on supplies. And if that was dinner or snacks or drinks or beer or whatever they wanted, they could spend the money however they wanted. This artist decided that they wanted to invite a ton of people. So they put out, a notice on Facebook. They had a bunch of people show up. But at this meeting, one of the facilitators was an African-American woman who was a recipient of a grant from a local organization. And she felt that a lot of her concerns from her grant that were outside this planning process hadn't been heard. And so she gathered a lot of other people who had some thoughts and also some similar complaints to her. And they came to this meeting and said, we want you to hear us. Here are a bunch of us who feel the same way, and we feel like we're not being listened to. And we feel like even this, where we're asked to, answer these 5 questions, is a little bit disingenuous, and we want something different. And so from this meeting, honestly, we were very surprised by that, because that hadn't been brought up to us as facilitators, but it was at this meeting. And so, we left the meeting and we said, okay, we were listening to this artist, we're hearing what she's saying, and perhaps, we have a focus group that's specifically about whatever that qualm is. And I'm trying to be very vague, but also clear enough so that I can, kind of let you know what I'm talking about. And out of that came out of the second conversation where that artist was asked to facilitate a second conversation with those artists who had similar complaints and similar thoughts about how arts and culture had been accessed in that city. The outcome of that conversation was the desire to create a Black Artists Guild. And I believe that we can talk about this because it is in the paper. Just last week, that was launched and received some funding to kind of kickstart their work there in Akron, which is a very, very exciting outcome of the planning process. And our client was part of helping, make the funding for that happen, which is just really, really wonderful. And we know that, if that artist hadn't brought those ideas and things that had happened to her in the past to the forefront and gathered her friends to kind of say, no more of this, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Maybe it would. I'd like to believe it would. But also, for our own, planning benefit, I'd like to think that because we were able to provide an opportunity for those folks to listen, and it was the right time that this thing was launched off the ground, and then given some funds to get started. And they have a
and especially because this was a diverse young professionals group. I think we heard really good feedback about how some of the cultural offerings provided by different organizations and communities in the region just weren't really meeting the needs of folks, that they were much more focused on demographics that didn't even live in the city of Akron necessarily, and that there were all kinds of issues with these events specifically, and how they were policed, and who was organizing them, and how much they cost, whether some events were free and they seemed more focused on this older demographic that wasn't in the city versus these other events. So there was a lot of really good feedback that we took away from these meetings as well, and we were able to internalize that again in all of these things. So it was very helpful for all of these events. And then of course we also wanted to focus on ensuring that we had geographic equity. So we hosted I believe 11 different meetups. 12 in addition to all the other things we just mentioned. We had 12 meetings throughout the city, in each at each community center or within the orbit of a community center, to ensure that there was geographic equity, and folks that couldn't head downtown or to some of the other far out places of these events were able to have something closer in their neighborhood. And then we also hosted community review. So after we did get our recommendations back, we were able to actually, bring those out to the public. This was at the Akron Art Museum. And we hosted a couple of these, again, all around the city to review the things that we heard. And in this image, you're seeing 3 artists actually next to their work that was developed during these neighborhood meetups. So we actually paid these artists to come to the meetup. Vision that we heard. We had 5 rounds of public review. Like I mentioned, we had lots of different opportunities, and this went all the way into we started this in January of 2019, and this went all the way into 2020, with our final public meeting happening after COVID started. Yeah. So we got a little bit into all these things. One wonderful thing and this was not done by us. This is something Arts Now and Nicole with Arts Now actually does at every meeting. And this was a really great way to just it laid the ground rules, but it also grounded everybody that was participating. And it was, we'd take a moment to acknowledge that everybody in the meeting is bringing their wisdom, and, nobody's wisdom is better than anyone else's at these meetings, that we can have disagreements and respectfully, have these conversations, but that we're not going to, be arguing and fighting, but it's really all about respect, that we're respecting everyone in this space and their uniqueness and their culture. And that within our meetings, we are holding ourselves to confidentiality, amongst everyone there. Can we always know that that's going to be true? No, but we can practice that, and we can hope everyone else does too, because we want people to be able to say things that are going to make each other uncomfortable, because that's the only way we're having real conversations. You know, it is uncomfortable. And that was one of the things that we really took away from this, is that we need to be able to put ourselves, especially as white people, and obviously as more privileged white people with college educations and all of this, that, you know, we need to be made to feel uncomfortable in these situations so that we can learn. And so that's something that we take with us everywhere. So, you know, again, when we listen really well, we have these uncomfortable discussions, and it changes the way that we're perceiving things. And, you know, we can get more buy-in and more trust from the people that we're listening to. And then, you know, just to sum it up, the input specifically led us to, we had a group of 3 folks that developed a statement of cultural equity that now lives at the heart of the plan. That really is the heart of the plan. And again, this is so far diverged, I think, from where this process started out, that it was just so important that this cultural equity was really the basis of the plan. And this was very, you know, crafted very specifically. Every word was went over, you know, 10, 15 times, and had conversations with folks out of all quarters to ensure that this really met the needs of everyone in the planning process. And, you know, we had priorities. So equity and accessibility, we said the priorities aren't ranked in the plan, except for equity and accessibility. They are number 1, both of them. And then, you know, we had, I think, 10 in total: education, talent, engagement, resources, connections, economic impact, placemaking, and public art. So this is a very big plan, and you can check it out online at akronculturalplan.com, and there's lots of information there. And so, you know, again, the input led us to ensure that we are having as many opportunities for conversations as possible, and also that, you know, lots of new partnerships were part of this as well. And so what happens when you really listen? You know, you can form those strong partnerships with grant makers, municipal governments, local nonprofits, and we had a whole priority list come out of this. And we had grant makers at some of our meetings, you know, community foundations that said, we're ready to fund this. We want to fund these things because they're so important. And this is the last slide. You know, I just wanted to reiterate that especially folks like us, like Amanda and I, we have to be open and be made to feel uncomfortable. And if you're a consultant and you're leading these things, or your organization is, you need to prep everyone that's a part of this to be ready to get in that space. And it's difficult. And you also need to bring in the right people. So sometimes we're not the right ones to facilitate, and we need to bring in others that are, you know, more comfortable with the community. Be intentional about who's participating. So we need to bring folks into the steering committee that aren't typically there. And we might need to have 2 groups. You know, if this is a plan that, you know, all those kind of heads of organizations need to be at the top of the table, that's fine. But let's have another steering committee as well, a community steering committee they're really hearing those recommendations. And then always bring in outside advice. The plan itself was reviewed by a DEIA consultant, and so this was very beneficial for us as individuals, as a firm, and really the city of Akron has glommed onto this plan and is so excited about it. So feel free to reach out to us with questions, and hopefully we still have some time to answer some questions.
Hi, thank you, Amanda and Josh. So we want to go to, we will go to the Q&A. We just want to give Charvis a little bit more spotlight time here. I know some folks came in late, so didn't get to see a little bit of his work. And I do have a question for you, Charvis. What's your discovery process before you actually paint? I know you mentioned to me you did, you're almost like a community historian.
Yeah, well, research is one of my main things. I like to go to the library, go to the microfiche, and read the old newspaper sections because a lot of small things happen that led to tragic incidents in people's lives. So you can go to the obituaries, the local library, and just the city hall and read your public records. But the main thing for me is I just go back and do a lot of old readings. For me, my city of Macon, Georgia, it was very segregated and still is. So a lot of the information that happened in Macon, Georgia wasn't talked about in Macon. But there were a lot of black newspapers at the time that were published in Philadelphia, Chicago, and cities like that in North Carolina. And they wrote about the tragic incidents in Macon. So I would take some of their information and a starting point for research and then do other investigation to find out the ways it would tie into bigger things. Like, for instance, in Macon in 1898, it was an incident where 4 people were killed on streetcars for refusing to give up their seats. There were 4 black men, and they were from out of town in different locations, but they refused to give up their seats and they were killed. And very few people know about that, and they don't know about the other kind of heroic incidents that happen all the time, constantly, that shape the way people have an image of themselves and the way that people have invisible fences. Because when you stay in a community or a society where those things happen, it creates an invisible barrier where people say, I don't want to cross that line and have the same consequences. And those kind of invisible barriers persist for years and years and years.
Thank you, Charvis. That was really helpful. Dominic, I think you had a follow-up question as well for Charvis.
I did. There's a lot of other questions in here for Charvis. I don't have any on the top of my head, but I think Keeney, if I'm saying that right, I think you asked a question about mentor. I think that was for you, Charvis. Do you have a mentor, someone that you're inspired by?
Well, in my community, we had a beautiful thing called the Tubman Museum of African American History. And that museum was started by a Catholic priest named Father Richard Kyle. He was a white man who just knew that the community needed to have examples of black art to just help it out to make it a better place. So he started a small place called the Tubman Museum, and he got a community member who he was a postman. His name was Wilfred Stroud, but he was a trained artist. And he went to Cooper Union to study art, but in Macon, Georgia, he couldn't be a professional artist. He was a postman. And Wilfred Stroud, he filled the Tubman Museum up with murals. And one of his biggest murals is From Africa to America. And I never got to meet Wilfred Stroud, but I learned so much of Africa from that mural that it was a big inspiration for me and the way I use my art to affect my community. Because earlier in my life, I would tell people all the time that my first instinct of Africa came from Tarzan movies. So I didn't have a life of Africa or black people. And that's the same way Native Americans are. Most people are introduced to Native Americans from cowboy movies. And in cowboy movies, you see Native Americans dancing around fires naked, and you think that's all they had to offer to society. And with Tarzan movies, you see black people dancing around the fire naked, and you think that's all Africans are. But it's not till you grow up and do research that you find out that Africa is the home of the world's oldest universities. They were performing successful cataract surgeries in Africa hundreds of years ago. So Africa is a birthplace of knowledge, medicine, and all types of civilization. And I learned that through his mural that he painted. And I try to just teach other people the same way by using my art in the same mode. But I didn't get to have a formal, per se, mentor, but his work has mentored me a lot.
Thank you so much. And we have someone actually who's raised their hand, so I'm going to go ahead and bring Katie to the stage. Hi, Katie.
Hey, Hey, thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation, Charvis. I have a question particularly about the minstrel shows. At our site, we're a historic site. We have a large emphasis on old-time music. And it wasn't until yesterday to a presentation that I was in that I didn't realize the connection in some of the old-time songs and how they're rooted in minstrel shows. So what would you suggest a way that we can provide that education here on site? I was thinking of some little signs or whatever, but what would you want to do as an artist?
Well, as an artist, it's just important to present the information factually. Well, if you have the sign and you show how it's used, we'd also have a paragraph about the time period and who wrote it and who performed it. And let it know that blackface was an impersonation of black people. Someone would see a black person performing something and then they would mimic it and add a lot more clown performing to it. So it was a way that you would see something a black person do and just think that everything about them is humorous. But in order to talk about that time period, we just must display it in an accurate manner and talk about the consequences of it. Such as recently, I didn't learn until recently that one of the songs, the Ice Cream Man, it goes back to the minstrel show. That's the song you hear the Ice Cream Man playing, is the great minstrel song. So learning about those things, it doesn't, take away all your fun memories of it, but it puts it in a proper context where you might not use it in the future. Some things, just because they are gathered in the past, doesn't mean they belong in the present. But we can explain them in a proper way to show why we don't use them anymore.
Can I mention one thing? Is that here in Macon, a really similar example to what you're talking about, Katie. I'm Julie, by the way. I'm doing the camera work for Charvis. But here in Macon, Emmett Miller, is that right?
Yeah.
Emmett Miller. Emmett Miller, who was a minstrel performer in Macon, he came and sang one of his songs on our stage. And for Don Clemens being a black old-time musician, it was there was a sense of trying to address that history. So I'll put that video in the comments because it's sort of very similar to what you're talking about and happened here in Macon.
Yeah, like we take the past that's hurtful and we show it ourselves to reclaim it. That's how I like the artist Betty Sars. She does a lot of the Aunt Jemima stuff to reclaim it. We can't just let it be hurtful. We have to show that it hurt us so we can move past it. Because if we just let it hurt us and we don't talk about it, we can't move past it. So it's important that I feel these kind of images in spaces so people can be hurt by them in a sense, but also move past it and not be affected by it. Because if you don't know that you look at it as a buffoon, then you don't think that buying $250, $300 shoes are buffoonish. When in actuality, it's something that's only marketed towards you to take your money. It's not something that would benefit your life at all. It's something that's just straight in relation to this. It's a minstrel show. It's something to make you look foolish. Because in actuality, anything at that price for a pair of tennis shoes, you must be foolish to use that. But they use that because they know that in our heart we are hurt. They know that we don't like our own blackness and we'll cover ourselves with other things to make ourselves feel good. So having $300 shoes is a direct relation to these kind of images. Because people who feel good about themselves don't need to have those things upon their body to feel good about them as a people. But when people hurt you and make you feel less than anything, you will cling to anything you can to feel better about yourself.
Thank you.
I think we had one other question for you, Charvis, from Laura Green. I just lost it. Okay, here it is. Laura asked if you could talk more about how you use your art to engage others in education and awareness, and how your artwork has inspired some change.
Well, first of all, I use my artwork to engage my kids at home first, because I would see their textbooks and notice that the section on African American history might just be a paragraph about they took slaves from Africa and then the Civil War, and that would be the whole thing about Black people. So I wanted my sons to have a different experience of their interpretation of what it means to have an African American heritage. So I did a lot of images and a lot of research, and it helped them out tremendously because they have a better sense of Blackness than I had at their age. And it shows in their goals and their dreams and their esteem. I try to engage my outside community a lot more, but it's somewhat hesitation. Besides this place, the McKeacham Art Center at Mercer University, very few places in Macon is open to my art because it's so controversial. I mean, it offends Black people and white people because sometimes in life you must offend people to wake them up. If you only show them things that please them, they will stay asleep. So I have to show them things that will make them think about things in a different way. So sometimes it's a hard way to show art, but I still have a chance to engage with kids, and it's a beautiful thing. When I can have a small show and talk to kids and tell them why it's important to challenge society and challenge the way you see things. And that marketing is trying to convince you that you need things you don't need. You're never marketed water. You're never marketed air, because those are the things you need. You are marketed the things you don't need at all. And they will have a way to influence your self-esteem if you don't have them. So I try to teach them that those aren't the things you need. You just need a good sense of who you are and a good sense of direction in life. And you get that by knowing your history and who your people really are. And if you don't know that, then you won't have a direction in life. But I still, hopefully I can every year have a good enough show to reach out to the kids in my community and have them come and I can talk to them and teach them about what it's like to really view the world without that veil upon your face. But in the all, I wish I could have a bigger impact, and I'm trying my best to work harder to have more impact on my society because I live in a place that's extremely segregated. And you can tell about how it has an effect on the young Black kids in our society because they don't, not only do they not like themselves, they don't like the other kids who look like them. And it's sad and tragic.
Got another raised hand here. I'll go ahead and bring Rebecca to the stage.
Hey, thanks for sharing, Charvis. I just had a question about programming. Have you created any programming around your artwork, or do you have your sights set on that in the future?
Well, for the most part, I like to celebrate certain holidays by having art shows around monumental occasions for me. I tried to have a show earlier this year to celebrate a tremendous incident in America. The first Black person of color to speak on the floor of the U.S. Capitol represented Macon, Georgia. His name is Jefferson Franklin Long, and he was a representative right after Reconstruction in the Civil War. And when he spoke on the U.S. Capitol, he talked about the dangers of the Ku Klux Klan in Macon, Georgia, and how they made it impossible for anybody to be free with the American flag, and how that organization posed a danger to freedom of America. The thing about it, if anybody knows about history, a few months later, all the Black people were expelled from Congress at that time. It was 100 years before any others ever took office. So for me, I like to do art shows that revolve around those kind of celebrations of people and incidents that people don't talk about. And one of the sad things is that incident directly revolves around the January 6th incident we just had, to where we see the Ku Klux Klan at the Capitol. So not addressing and accurately portraying the history of the past, it makes it where it will keep repeating. So I don't know as far as other kind of programs, but I like to do art shows that revolve around specific celebrations that I can pay tribute to the people that don't get any kind of justice brought to them, who sacrifice so much.
Thanks so much, Charvis, and
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. We're gonna go ahead, just for the sake of time, and switch to some questions we have for Josh and Amanda. Thank you so much, Charvis.
But a great pleasure sharing my art with you. It's been wonderful.
Okay, so Josh and Amanda, one of our most upvoted questions comes from Dr. Keith Lee. He asks, how do you utilize individual artists, especially BIPOC artists, in developing and planning public arts projects?
Well, that's a great question. I think obviously we kind of demonstrated throughout our presentation a little bit about how we did actually use artists as part of the planning process. Specifically in the kind of procurement process with this, that's a much deeper conversation, I guess, when we're working with cities on how to, how they can get more public artists engaged. It's a very difficult issue, and it's a topic that we think really needs to be addressed a lot more within some cities about how they actually hire artists, because they have a very specific method, most of them, of doing it that really doesn't open itself up to a lot of non-white artists. So it's something that needs addressed, but particularly in our planning processes, we intentionally talk to folks and go out of our way to find as diverse of group of artists to hire as possible. Amanda, you have other things you wanted to add to that?
I don't think so. We're constantly having conversations about the procurement process because oftentimes, the department or the hiring agency that we're working for is not who's in control of the procurement process. That's the city itself. And so, changing the procurement process for public art is like literally turning a ship. It's very, very, very challenging.
Thank you for that. Let's see if I can combine a couple of these, because there's a lot of questions for you all. So right now we're just kind of doing them by most upvoted. So the next question, how do you, this is what I just asked. What ethnic contractors do you utilize when building and contracting in rural, urban, and suburban neighborhoods on your projects?
So we do not build public art. We're only contracted as the planner. There are some times in which we're contracted to be the curator, which usually just means that we're running the process for the city. And so we're usually the contracted agency. When we hire artists, we're relying on our client, obviously, because they're the ones who know their community best, and they're going to be able to connect us to local partners within the community to help us identify those people who we could hire as facilitators if that was part of the process that they wanted as part of their process. Again, a lot of these processes are driven by the client and also driven by a budget. So I think that those are really important things to kind of keep in mind. And, we constantly advocate for larger budgets for these things so that we can cast a much wider net. But as we all know, arts and culture traditionally have been the first things to get cut. And I think that everything's constricting now. So we'll see kind of what that looks like here in the future. But I do think that people are starting to pay attention more and are very interested in hiring artists of color to be a part of these processes.
Next question is, what impact have you seen after this extensive planning process in Akron, in addition to the Black Artists Guild that you mentioned?
There are a lot of things that are happening in Akron that are really exciting. One of the things that Akron did, again, they're a shrinking city with a very small budget, and their general fund and all their capital improvement dollars go to service debt, historic debt that they have and have carried for quite some time. So they don't have a ton of money. But the city of Akron actually adopted a very interesting and creative funding mechanism in the middle of a pandemic, mind you. where they are actually going to be utilizing TIF service funds to fund a public art program. So they adopted the cultural plan, they adopted the policy and the ordinance that were needed to operationalize a public art program within the city of Akron. And they adopted a funding mechanism and sat a commission during a pandemic. Their commission started having their meetings in November, and they're having them monthly, and they have a very excited group of people who have joined that commission. Some of the other things that they've done, they're working on an accessibility library right now so that people who are hosting cultural events and performances throughout the city can come and borrow some of those different pieces of equipment that are needed to make their events more accessible, that could be cost restrictive to those people who are organizing and putting on those events. There are a bunch of murals that are going on right now. Josh, I don't know what else there is going on.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with them right now to keep an updated list of what the accomplishments of the plan. So stay tuned on the akronculturalplan.com for more on that.
Nice, thank you. This next question, I think any of you can answer. I think Charvis too, if you have some insight on this. But this question is basically, I might rephrase it a little bit, but how do you attract, or I guess how do you connect or collaborate or work with the BIPOC community without tokenizing them? So as an organization, or even Charvis, from an artist perspective, how do folks work with that population without tokenizing?
Yeah, I mean, that obviously that is a sticky issue, that you might run into. And I'm thinking about like how we are bringing people into the steering committees, as we were talking about that earlier. And there is certainly a balance, where we're not saying, oh, we just need to bring somebody in because we want it to look good that we have representation from all these communities. I think more than anything else, it's that, we actually listen, or in the case of artists, like if I'll use an example of, we had 3 artists create pieces of work as part of the planning process, and they were, at least one of them could be considered very controversial,
Yes.
but we allowed them artistic freedom. So I think one way to not tokenize people is to allow them to say and do, the things that they feel comfortable saying and doing. So if we would have sat there and said, oh, you need to make this something that's acceptable to everyone, then that to me would be moving it, towards a bad way of doing it. But by allowing people freedom, but like you said, Charvis or other folks, obviously we're the white people here, so it's not necessarily, we're not the ones to say what is and is not, comfortable for BIPOC artists or other folks that are collaborating.
Charles, just want to check if you had anything that you want to add. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Josh, I'll just add from my experience. I think just approaching something genuinely, and like, a genuine approach to wanting to connect with community members that may be outside your demographics. And really, like, I think you said what's important is listening, asking questions and listening. And you might get, I'll say, burned either here or there, but it's a learning experience. But being okay with, learning, and you might, ask something that raises some energetic responses, I'll say. But I think if you're coming at it from a place of authenticity and really wanting to learn about the community and really wanting to find ways to collaborate and support, is really a way to approach it. And that question I know from Katie, and Katie, I know you mentioned yesterday challenges and wanting to hire more Black musicians and some challenges that you're facing. And I'll just say really explore what those barriers are and kind of why that's not happening right now. For yourself, and talking to those folks, or trying to find someone to talk to and understand directly from that perspective. But listening is huge for sure. Like really just taking a step back, listening, not making assumptions, not judging, not, trying to wipe away whatever preconceived notions you may have, but really just authentic listening for sure. Thank you. Sorry, I gotta get back to the Q&A. Okay. Next question is how do you facilitate listening when you're faced with so many complaints? When people have real problems and disparages and they want answers sooner than later, like how do you address that? And what was the timeline for you in addressing the community after all the listening and gathering of information?
I think that you just said something, Dominique, that is right up the alley of how to deal with this. I mean, you guys saw how many hours we put into this, and a lot of those conversations were exactly this. But you have to be genuine and authentic about it. It's not easy to say, we can't solve that issue. You know, as we're running a planning process, we want to make everybody feel good, like we're going to do everything possible. But we have to be honest and say, you know, I don't think that we can solve a systemic issue that our, you know, country is built upon. We're not going to fix that. We want to figure out what we can do to accomplish, you know, the best that we can do as part of this process. So I think that is where we have to go. So, you know, and we have to just listen. So it might be frustrating to sit there for 45 minutes and, you know, listen to somebody talk about all the problems in their life, which we, you know, this is not just something that when we're talking about race, this is like every community. People want to, whether it's they're complaining about, you know, how much parking is at the arena in their community, or whether it's about, you know, systemic issues in our society. As a planner, as somebody doing this process, it's incumbent upon us to sit there, listen, genuinely listen, understand their concern, you know, voice that back to them, and then say, here's what I think we can do, or what do you think we should do? How do you think we should solve this within the constraints of the process that we're putting on?
One of the other things too that we do specifically when there are a lot of emotions and a lot of concerns and things that are happening in conversation is that you know, we always are preparing materials for our steering committee that are not internal or private documents. And those documents are always shared back with people, and we're not concealing anything. And so if people are doubting the process because they have been, you know, conditioned to doubt the process because it's always been top down, they can see and look back and say like, okay, you know, in January, they talked to this many people and this was the result. In June, they had talked to this many people, and here's where I see my comments beginning to, you know, get woven into the conversation. And I can see that support building on the other conversations that they're having. So I'm seeing that my voice is actually being recorded and listened to and then put back for other people to hear. And I think that I don't want to disparage planners, but you know, we're taught a lot about public engagement and how important the community voice is, and that is true. And we're taught that it's at the heart of everything that we do. But a lot of planners and people, and you know, people on boards and commissions, on municipal boards and commissions, aren't listening to people. They're there for their own agenda, and their clients often have a preset agenda. So it's important to be honest both with your client and understanding what, if they do have a preset agenda, what it is, and you know, being able to respond to that and say, well, I'm going to push back here and here and here because here are all the ways that I heard that this isn't what your community wants. And I think, you know, just honesty has to be at the kind of forefront of everything that we're doing, because when you're honest back to the people that you're talking to and saying, well, I don't know how I can fix the procurement process because that is like how they contract every single thing, you know, within a large government agency. That's not something I can control, but here's what we can control. And I think just being really clear with people all the time and not just kind of like patting them on the head and being like, yeah, that's a good idea. What else? You know, no, we have to like respond to it. And if we already know the answer and know what the outcome is going to be, just share that.
Thank you, Amanda and Josh and Harvest. I'm just letting everyone know that 12:55 is our mark. We can go 5 minutes later. So folks, if you need to take your lunch break, that's from 12:55 to 1:30. And then the next session is from 1:30 to 3 p.m. But we're happy to stay on a little bit longer if you, Josh, Amanda, and Charvis are okay with that too.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Cool. I just want to, like, Josh, you mentioned that too, is having maybe you're not the right person to represent the community. And I think that's really valid too. And just wanted to highlight that, because you're right, depending on what community, maybe there's a language barrier. And so you need to have someone who's speaking that language to come in and feel like, okay, I can feel more comfortable trusting and being able to build that trust. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. I saw one of the questions was about whether, well, my answer is going to be biased. So it's, should consultants run these types of processes? Of course, yeah. I mean, we won't work. But what I honestly believe is that it's really hard for folks that are inside these organizations to lead anything like this. And key to Akron was not having anyone from Akron in the conversations that we were having. And that was huge. And that was intentional. And that is, I think probably almost every planning process we do, we have the conversations ourselves, because we are, as non-biased, we go in saying we're working for the city, so they're paying us, obviously, but we're not biased, right away. We are willing to listen.
Nice. We've got no shortage of questions over here. Another one is, do you always use artists?
Sorry, Dominique, you're muted. I don't know, you're trying to say something.
I am?
It looked like you were. Do you want to take 2 more questions? Josh, Amanda, Harvis, was there a question there that you're like, oh, okay, definitely want to answer that one? I know we have some upvoted here. We do have a question like, will you, Josh and Amanda, be at a table? You guys want to, we can reserve a table for you. It looks like you have some follow-up questions.
Yeah, we can do that.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I can set up a table named after you two, and then people can go there after we end. That's cool. Okay. And there's a question here from Marian. Do you always use art and artists to engage people in all of your planning projects you work on, or what this is unique to this particular project?
Honestly, it's all dependent upon budget, right? So it also depends on the scope of the project. I'd like to hire artists in everything that we do, but we're also working with very constrained budgets, especially coming into 2021. We're seeing that the budgets for these projects are less than half of what the project was for Akron, which makes it really a challenging thing to do all of the same scope within that small of a budget. So when there is a budget, we are hiring artists, and that is at the heart of what we're doing. And we're very clear about that with our clients at the very beginning. If this is your budget, we don't have the budget to hire artists. If you changed your budget by X amount, we could hire artists, and this is what the engagement process could look like. We like to hire artists to run the engagement process because it's way more exciting than what we plan. We're planners, we're not artists. We're thinking about fun ways to ask questions and think about, how do you look at a map? But Josh and I are not artists, and artists do a much better job at engaging the public than we do. But sometimes, we're having to plan what we're doing. So it really is all dependent upon this specific project.
All right, I think that's it. So did anyone else have a clear question? Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda, Josh, Charvis, Dominique. Really great conversations. And I will set up a table too. Charvis, I'll add your name too if you want to join us at a table. Some people had some extra questions. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank